So I'd like to welcome everybody and thank you for joining us today. My name is Christine McKenzie. I'm the Regional Director of Sales for Aspira Retirement Living. To take you through this presentation today, I'm pleased to introduce you to Deborah Backey. Deborah worked as an executive in seniors care for 11 years, and during this time, she became a resident's family member 3 times with her husband, mom, and dad. So those life-changing experiences inspired her to leave her corporate career in 2017 so she could focus on helping seniors, care homes, and residents' families relate, appreciate, and help each other as partners in care. After all, these same goals in mind, quality of life and care for their loved one and resident. Deborah's the author of 2 books, Recipe for Empathy and Now What? Both of these playbooks for both care team members and families to be more intentional and relational in this key relationship and create moments that matter. In today's webinar title, I Think My Parents Need More Help, Now What? She will cover some more important topics such as how to position yourself as a guide for your parents, questions to support your role in decision-making, explore beliefs, assumptions, and emotions that can help you manage this life change with more ease and comfort, and the expectations gap and how to get clear with what to expect. As we move through this presentation today, please feel free to pop any questions into the chat, and we look forward to hearing any questions and comments. And now over to you, Deborah.
Thank you so much, Christine, and good afternoon, everybody. Is everybody see me okay? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you. So, and thank you to Aspira for hosting this webinar. It is so key and critical that we're able to get the information that we need when it comes to reflecting on this. My aging parents need more help. Now what? And it's even more common of a conversation that we're having as we are the demographic that is starting to get in that age where we're kind of in that sandwich generation with our kids that we're raising, or whether they're living independently, but still somewhat dependent, and our parents. And I asked myself this question, I think my parents need more help. Now what? On 2 separate occasions in 2 different times in my life. And the first was with my dad, who had been diagnosed with Parkinson's and Lewy body dementia probably about in his mid-70s. And my parents were living in their familial home that they lived in for a couple of decades. And my mom was white knuckling it, trying to take care of the needs and the changes as his health situation continued to progress and decline. And so we needed to make that tough decision because of a crisis, because of falls, because of calls for an ambulance and trips to emergency, that we needed to make that tough decision to have him placed on a crisis list into long-term care. And that was back in late 2010. And my dad lived in a long-term care home for 6 months before passing away in the spring of 2011. And then all of a sudden, my mom found herself as a widow, after having been married to my dad for decades, living in the house that they shared together all by herself. And, I think she did okay for the first couple of years, but I also have to share with you that I think that there were signs that I was missing. I was working full-time, commuting 2 hours a day, raising 2 kids on my own, because at this point, my husband had already passed away. And I have 2 brothers. I'm the youngest, but I have 2 brothers that they also, too, had their careers and their busy lives. And so I think that there were changes that were happening, but I wasn't quite as attentive as I wish that I had been. So probably a couple of years in, that's when I really started to notice the big changes with my mom. She was eating less and she was losing weight. And I noticed how she would get me to run up the stairs to fetch things for her. And it was really because the stairs were starting to become a problem for her. And she thankfully made the decision herself to surrender her driver's license, which was a really good decision, I have to tell you. But then that meant that she wasn't going out grocery shopping as much. And I just noticed that the things that she used to take a lot of joy in with cooking and preparing meals, because she was on her own and only feeding herself, it really started to decline. And the other thing that I stumbled upon, and she never admitted this, but she wasn't taking her medications as prescribed, not intentionally, but her memory was starting to fail her. And instead of asking for help, she just tried to hide it. So it became a very stressful time that I was trying to help support her with. And we probably, I'm going to say, worked on her for about a year to convince her that it was time to consider looking at what her options were. And that leads me to, when we think about, it's really hard for us to admit that our parents are aging, that they're getting older, that they may not have the same physical capacity, they may not have the same cognitive abilities, because we've been used to them being able to function fully as our parents, as adults. And then all of a sudden this role reversal starts to step in. And that's what I found was I was now turning into that parenting, my parent kind of role. And so with that, there's 3 key concepts that I want to share with you today to help you, as you may be thinking, I'm assuming that since you're here with us today, you're thinking, my aging parents need more help. Now what? And the other thing that I'm going to assume is that you may not know, you may not be an expert in the world of seniors care, because most people aren't, unless you've had a personal experience or you work in the industry. It's that kind of thing that we don't really get a lot of insider education on. It is a part of our very complex healthcare system. And within our complex healthcare system is the seniors care continuum, which is also very complex. So going to be sharing 3 concepts and ideas to help equip and empower you as you are grappling with this question and looking for the right approach. The first is, take the lead and be the guide that your parents need. And they may not admit or know that this is what they need from you, but it is a way to be able to step into a new role besides the role that you currently have as daughter or son, or whatever your relationship is to someone that you're thinking needs more help. And I almost wish that there was a bit of a job description that came with this, because it was when the penny dropped for me and I really recognized that my mom needed me to take the lead and be her guide. It was, okay, I need to get my head wrapped around what that looks like without stepping on toes or crossing boundaries, but also I could start to see around the corner that she wasn't able to yet as to where this was heading. And a lot of times when people make the decision to help transition their parent into a seniors care home, it's usually because of crisis. It's usually because some acute episode has happened, like my dad and the constant trips to the emergency, or it could be a fall and all of a sudden they've broken their hip and they're no longer mobile. And from this, what I want to encourage you to think about is to be able to get ahead of that stress and strain and urgency, which can really handcuff you in the decisions that you're able to make, where we want to be able to have a bit of a runway for consideration before things get out of hand. So when I looked at my role, I felt like, since I work in healthcare, it made sense that my role would be my mom's healthcare advocate, managing her medical appointments, going to appointments with her when I was able to, and really being that lead in helping her think about what it could look like by selling her house and moving into an independent living environment. My one brother, he's the engineer in the family and he loves numbers. So he was the one that was going to manage all of my mom's financial paperwork and all of those needs. And then my other brother, he's the fun brother. So he was the one that did the Costco runs and got the treats and was sort of more of the entertainer. So we all had our own roles to play. And thankfully, I mean, we have our dysfunction just like every family, but we were able to get really clear on what our roles were and how we could support my mom and each other. And I think this is where it's really important. And I'm grateful that you're here today, because it tells me that you are starting to think about needing a plan and having a plan that can support you and everybody in your family to make this a smooth transition. So I think a great place to start. I'm certified as a corporate coach, so I love questions. I love that, being in that state of curiosity. So I have a number of questions to share with you that I think can be really empowering and helpful as you start working on building this plan. And I understand this is being recorded and it will be available. So if you want to be able to go back and take, or also take screenshots to capture these questions, please feel free to do that. First question is, what are you committed to? You really need to think about the reality of your life and your lifestyle and what the current state reality is as to what you are able and willing and wanting to commit to as far as being a guide and taking the lead with what your parents need. And as I alluded to, I looked at what I was willing to and wanted to commit to was helping my mom figure out, finding a real estate agent that we could trust and count on to help us with the listing and the sale of her home. I was committing to helping her look at all the different options within the community that she wanted to live in and help her and also allow her to make the decision, because this is where she was going to be living for the next few years. I also was committed to being the main point of contact for my brothers so that she wouldn't be having to explain things a number of different times, and we coordinated times that we could do that. And I also committed to being her emotional support. And I still think that there would be a needs improvement when I look back. I think I underestimated the loss that my mom was feeling, needing to sell that home, the loss that she was feeling when we needed to downsize her personal belongings to maybe 30% of what she had and sorting through that whole process. The loss that she was feeling leaving her community, even though she was moving to a place that was only 15 minutes away and actually closer to the downtown where she wanted to be, it was still a loss. So I think it's that balance, and part of the challenge is she could see what she was giving up, her home, her community, and even the downsides, right? The stairs, the loneliness, all of that. But she couldn't see around the corner and into the future as to what it would look like to live in independent retirement living and all of the benefits and the great things that she would soon realize. And so I think that that's important to keep in mind. And so, with this, what are you committed to? You really want to be honest with yourself as to what your capabilities, what your bandwidth, what you're able to do and offer and provide. And if you have siblings and you're able to divide it up, I certainly recommend that. And that leads to this question: what does being their guide look like? And when you've been able to look at what your current capabilities and bandwidth with your own life and lifestyle is, this is an opportunity to really do an assessment and use some pragmatism of what the current state reality for your parent or parents actually looks like. And I think that part of that is to put aside some of the emotion for a moment so that we can do an assessment. And I'll share with you the list that I created for when I was reviewing for my mom. Her current state situation was she was living alone, and she'd had some falls, even though she tried to tell me that she didn't. And I was concerned about her having more falls and creating even more damage for herself and limiting her options moving forward. I was worried about her forgetfulness. And although she had never left the stove on, I don't know about you, but I can go to a worst case scenario thinking pretty quickly. I'm thinking she's going to leave the stove on, that's something that she's cooking, then it's going to burst into flames and the whole house is going to burn down. Right. So that forgetfulness was with other little things that was causing a concern for me. She was eating less. I mean, she was already a thin woman anyway, but she was losing even more weight. Was worried about her medications and taking it properly, whether she was taking too much of something or not enough of another, and what kind of negative outcomes would come from that. I was worried about her security. In her forgetfulness, would she forget to lock the front door or close the patio door? This was the stuff that was keeping me up at night. That she was more isolated. I had a couple of her friends call me and say, is your mom okay? We've called, she's not calling back. We've invited her out, she's not coming out. She was self-isolating. And my mom was a very socially selective introvert. So it's not like she had this huge group of friends, but I was noticing that even in that limited circle of friends she had, she was becoming more isolated. And the finding the phone. So I don't know if any of you have dealt with this, but I would phone her, no answer. 15, 20 minutes later, phone her, no answer. And then that catastrophic thinking would happen. And next thing you know, I'm driving over to her place and she's like, nothing's ever happened. Because, oh, yeah, I can't find the phone. Or I think the battery died. And she was never going to buy into having a cell phone. And so that inability to reach her or reach somebody that could actually connect with her was a concern. So when you think about, and maybe some of these are, you're kind of nodding your head going, yep, I've kind of felt that too. Those are those little warning signs that, okay, I think my parents need more help. Now what? It's helpful to think about within these categories of, when you think about the current state, think about what is the physical environment like? Are there stairs that are causing an issue? Is there, lots of yard work that needs to be done that they're not able to get around, and maybe they either don't want to or they can't outsource that? What are their physical abilities? If you can think about what did they look like and how did they act and move a year ago or even 6 months ago compared to now, are there any changes? Mental capacity, forgetfulness. One of the things we noticed with my dad was the paranoia that comes with dementia. And it was very kind of subtle, and you'd almost buy into some of his paranoia that he was having. But noticing those kinds of changes and the social connections, are they maintaining that? Are they starting to kind of slide back? So those are, I think, some helpful things to look at. And a reminder, I encourage you to look at facing the facts of the current reality. What's working, what's not. And that moves us to looking at, once you've really been able to clarify that current state reality. And I also encourage you, if you've got siblings or other people, get inputs from them. Sometimes we don't see everything that other people see, or sometimes our parents hide certain things that maybe they don't hide in front of other people. So looking at the ideal state, this was my list. I wanted my mom to have a living space that she really enjoyed living in. Didn't have to have a whole bunch of square footage, but the layout, accessibility was important to me. She wanted to stay in Burlington. That's where she lived most of her life, and she was comfortable and familiar there. It needed to be dog friendly. She had her little dog Zara that was coming with her. And I wanted to have that there were social activities or a social environment that would work for her. That didn't mean that she had to sign up for everything that was going on, but something that would work for her. Parking, that was mine. Downtown Burlington parking is nuts. So I wanted to make sure that a place that she was moving into had accessible parking. Great food. My mom was a great cook, and she loved preparing meals. And I wanted her to have the opportunity to enjoy sitting in a beautiful dining room, meeting new friends, and enjoying delicious meals. And then I wanted her to have a kitchenette so that she could make a cup of tea. She could have a toaster and make a piece of toast and peanut butter, or whatever her favorite was, and a fridge that she can keep little snacks in. And so, actually, I want to show you, this is a picture of my mom, Carol, and we're enjoying lunch in the dining room area in the home that she lived in. And, it was great to be able to go and spend time and not feel like it's just visiting. It's like she and I are going out for lunch and enjoying each other's company. So here's the opportunity that I'm suggesting here is, looking at really understanding and prioritizing what's important for you. And that's what's most important to you, as well as what's most important to your parents, and having that conversation. And ideally, what you want and what they want are the same thing. And if there are differences, then to look at what, if any, are their deal breakers. If we found a place and parking wasn't ideal, then I could certainly live with that. I would just complain to her about it every time I went to see her. But to really look at what is most important, because then that's going to help you to be able to prioritize and looking at what really matters. The second concept that I want to share with you is challenge your beliefs, assumptions, and emotions. And I'll just start with, I don't know if it's still the elephant in the room, but we all know what we have gone through globally over the past number of years and how that has impacted healthcare and seniors care. And there's been a lot of negative stories. And I think that it's really done a disservice for both the seniors care industry as well as people who have their loved ones living in seniors care, whether that's in a home care environment, long-term care, assisted living, or retirement, that are so grateful that there are those supports and those systems in place. Because when they look back at the reality, like my mom with my dad, I have no doubt that the length of time she continued to care for my dad had a negative impact on her health. And so we need to look at what are our beliefs, assumptions, and emotions around this. Most people that I talk to, and I talk to a lot of families that are either at the beginning of their journey or they're in their journey, or even with my circle of friends, is they grapple with, is this the right decision? Is it right to do it now? Maybe my parents can stay at home for another couple of years. Because what I tend to get them to think about is, what are you assuming about what that move and that change could look like? And what do you think, how long or how sustainable do you think your current reality situation is? Which can be hard to really assess unless you've got some clinical experience, and depending on what the medical conditions that the family's dealing with. And so I think it's really important to look at these questions. And these are questions that I ask people when they come to talk to me about it. What are you most worried about right now? And what is your biggest concern right now? And what's the real challenge now for you? For every family, it's going to be different. And I think what that does is it really wraps into this overarching question of what's currently not working that's keeping you up at night. When I think back to what was keeping me up at night with my mom, is I was worried that I was going to get a call in the middle of the night that she'd had a fall. I had a good friend of mine whose mother, she went to her apartment one morning to take her to a doctor's appointment, and she found her mother on the floor. She'd had a stroke earlier that morning, and we don't know how long she was laying on the floor for. Those were the things that I worried about, my mom living on her own and not knowing if something were to happen. I was worried about her safety and all those things that I talked about earlier in the current reality. And I was worried about her level of forgetfulness and where this was going. And I was worried that we were going to get to a point where she may not be open to looking at an alternative living arrangement and selling her house if we got to a point where her cognitive ability was going to be a barrier. So this is an opportunity to really challenge yourself and think about the assumptions and the beliefs that may be tied up with the emotions that you're feeling based on things that you've heard. Or, like I tend to say as family members, we don't know what we don't know. And so part of it is really digging down deep and seeing where we're feeling about this, and then start to ask ourselves some practical questions. What do I know about retirement living? Like, really, what is it that I know about retirement living, the business, the homes, how they work? What resources can I tap into to learn more? And being here on this webinar today is a great opportunity to start gathering information. You're not going to be able to figure out everything in one webinar or one day, but part of it is really starting to do your research and gathering the data that you need to make a more effective decision. What's most important for me to understand? We all have our different levels of things that we prioritize. And so what do I need to most understand to feel more comfortable or confident and competent in helping to make this decision so that I can be the best guide for my parent as they go through, and we go through as a family, a very big life-changing transition. Which leads to the how can I be the best guide for my parents to help them make the best decision. I mean, I felt honored and privileged that my mom trusted me and was looking for that guidance, and yet was still able to maintain the independence of, at the end of the day, she was the one that was making the decision in her best interests. The third concept is clarify and adjust expectations. And I want to share this formula with you, which you can apply anytime that you find yourself having an expectation. This will be helpful. Disappointment equals expectations minus reality. So when you think about it, you may have, if you've got an expectation at this level, but reality is here, that gap in between is where disappointment lies. It could be silly little examples like driving through the, getting your coffee at the drive-through, and then you take your first sip and it's got sugar in it and you ask for no sugar. It could be expecting that you're going to hit every green light because you feel lucky today and you hit every red light. Or maybe you expect that after a big snowstorm that the people that you've hired to shovel your driveway will be there in time for you to be able to get out. So again, I know that those are silly little examples, but it helps us to put into context and to think about, where are we forming these expectations? It's like somebody said to me, you know, I got home and I really expected one of my kids was going to unload the dishwasher for me, knowing that I work so hard every day. And of course I said, did you communicate that expectation? Did they know that that's what you were wanting? And of course the disappointment when they open up the dishwasher and it's full. And it reminds me of this quote. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Brene Brown in her latest book, Atlas of the Heart. But she talks about this and says, disappointment is unmet expectations. The more significant the expectations, the more significant the disappointment. And goes on to say, the unconscious, unexamined, and unexpressed expectations are the most dangerous and often turn into disappointment. In fact, the research tells us that disappointment is one of the most frequently experienced emotions, and it tends to be experienced at a high level of intensity. So even if you're sitting here thinking, how many times have I been disappointed today? It's really looking at, what are the expectations that we're forming? And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because in all the work that I've done, I've worked in seniors care for 11 years. I have had my own company for the last 6 years. All I do is work in seniors care and work specifically in supporting the family relationship. When things go sideways, when there's conflict or unmet expectations, and the disappointment, that's what creates the issue. And anytime we're making big decisions, it's important that we go in eyes wide open and understand, what are realistic expectations? What's possible here? And I think a great place to start with that is to look at this question: what does success look like to you when you're thinking about helping your parents transition into independent living, or maybe it's assisted living? What would that success look like to you? And I think the opportunity is, if you, we'll play the pretend game that your parents have moved into the home of their choice, and it's 6 months from now. And we're having a conversation, and I say to you, so how's it going with your parent or your parents in their independent retirement living home? And you start to describe how wowed you are. What does that look like for you? What are the things that you find yourself reflecting on? What have your experiences been? How do you feel when you walk into the home to visit your parents? What are the relationships with the care team and the management team like? How do you enjoy meeting up with the friends that they've made in the home? And this way is going to give you a good handle on what that success looks like. This is a picture of my mom, and she lived in retirement living for about 2 years, and then she got diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia, and we needed to move her into assisted living. So she still had a certain level of independence, but also required some supports. And when I looked at what success looked like in both of those places that she lived in, I wanted her to love the space that she lived in, that it was supporting her, that the bathroom was accessible, and she had enough room for, her makeup and her hair stuff and all of the things that she really enjoyed. I wanted her to have not just cleaning help, but that person that pops in and has a quick and cute conversation with my mom and makes her smile while she's just kind of tidying up for her. I wanted to have, if from success, I wanted a good relationship with the care team. And I wanted to know that they know my mom, they appreciate, and that they really love my mom, which they did. And I wanted to be able to have the kind of relationship that we could problem solve together. Because wouldn't it be lovely if everything was perfect all the time? And it's not. There are things that may happen. Socks may go missing, right? There may be some requests that you find that you're not getting as quick a response to. As much as in seniors care, there's always the commitment to quality and service and support, there are things that can falter on both sides. And so it was important to me, again, because I work in the industry, that I had that kind of relationship that we could problem solve and be collaborative together. And that also I wanted them to be comfortable that they could come and talk to me about further declines or signs that my mom was going to require more help and to understand what that would look like. I also wanted my mom to be able to say, I really love living here and I really appreciate the people and the support that I have, combined with knowing that there was the true independence that she needed to give up to have this support. So I encourage you to think about, with success, looking at these categories, in looking at from a financial standpoint, and in order to properly educate yourself so that you know what success can look like, what is the financial element that you need to be considering? Operational, how does the home work? What are the different departments? What are the different roles that people have? The care support. If you're starting at that independent living level, there may or likely come a time where you do require to have more support. My mom didn't necessarily need her medication management done through care support on day one, but within a few months of being in there, that's certainly what she needed. And then some of the additional personal care that progressed. And then the community involvement. Is the home, do they have outreach within the community that they're working in, where your parents are living in? And what other kind of community involvement and support is there? And I would suggest to look at prioritizing that. I mean, for us, I understood the operational. I could speak the language, so that wasn't really a priority for me. And my mom was thankfully financially able to, that wasn't going to be a decision maker as to where she was going to live. What was important to us was the care support and what kinds of community involvement at the level that she wanted to be involved that was available for her, so that she would be engaged and not feel bored or isolated. Another resource is, it was mentioned in my introduction that I've written a couple of books, and my latest is called Now What? Managing the Emotional Journey of Long-Term Care for Families. And don't let the long-term care in the title scare you off, because it really is about seniors care. And I share a bit about my experience with my mom being in assisted living. But within that book, there's 20 misconceptions that families typically have about seniors care that I provide some education and insight on. So it's a resource that you may want to consider when you are really building up your role and stepping into that guide role. So just to wrap these, as a reminder, the 3 key concepts that I hope that you're able to take away with you and to give some further thought and even generate some discussion and dialogue with other family members. Take the lead and be the guide your parents need, and understand that this is a new role that has responsibility, but also privilege with it, to help our parents through to the next chapter of their life, and to really look at how we can make it the best situation possible, and have lots and lots of enjoyment in those years. Challenge your beliefs, assumptions, and emotions. Really get clear on things that may be holding you back from making decisions, and using the questions that I provided previously. And manage, I would actually say clarify and manage expectations. And one of the things I meant to share earlier is, with that, what does success look like? I would encourage you, when you are meeting with someone, when you're looking at making that decision, is to share what that success vision looks like for you, because that is really going to help the home in understanding what's important to you and what your priorities are. And I would also say, I encourage homes to ask families that question. Use that question. What does success look like? If 6 months in, you're just so thrilled that you've moved your mom here into our home, what needs to happen in order for you to be glowing about it? And then it really helps to shape and give you a little bit more influence and control over a really big life decision. So I'm on social. You can find me at my website's deborahbhakti.com. And I just want to say thank you so much to the team at Aspira for inviting me to connect with you today. And I'm going to pass it back over to Christine.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation. So we actually have a few questions in the chat that I thought maybe we'd ask first before we go to the next slide.
Sure.
So have you ever dealt with a situation where parents live abroad and want to move back to Canada? All of the points you make are fantastic, but so hard to accomplish across the ocean. My parents both have had health crisis in the fall and now live in care home in England. They want to move to another one here, but they won't have health care for the first summer months. And my father's age is old enough that many insurers won't insure him. Have you known of any of this situation? Any thoughts?
Wow, that sounds complicated. And I personally haven't dealt with that. I do know someone that I would say is like a systems navigator, and I'm happy to provide that person's contact info to Christine. And if you've got, for the person who asked the question, Christine, if you've got the contact info, then we can get that through. I think there are people who specialize in that, and this is going to take a little bit of patience and research and probably a lot of phone calls. But if we can connect you with someone that has done this before, or they know someone that's done that, we'll make sure that you get that name.
They said they would greatly appreciate that.
Okay.
And we've also done, in retirement, we've actually had some communities that have done this transition, so we can also help on our end as well. Next question. So what's your advice in situations where the parent is starting to need more help, but very obstinate and never open to the conversation?
Never? Like never?
Not even, sorry. It says, I put that word together.
Not even. Yeah, I mean, I wish I had these are the 3 things that you need to do and you'll be 100% guaranteed success. I think it's persistence and it's patience. And perhaps working through some of these questions. And the other thing I will say, kind of going back to that healthcare systems navigator, sometimes, and I've seen this happen, that the family's just not able to get through to them. It's sort of like how, as parents, our kids never listen to us, but then somebody else gives them the exact same suggestion and then they're all over it like it's a new idea. Sometimes working with someone who comes from the industry that can help in that regard, that doesn't have any other agenda. And so I'm just, again, thinking of the person whose name that I'll be providing to Christine. She's had a lot of success with going in and having that conversation and it's because it's a third person and can actually ask questions that don't necessarily make the parent feel defensive, because they're really skilled at that, and they're asking open-ended, non-judgmental, more curiosity questions with an opportunity to kind of pepper in some stories of other people of a similar age and stage where, quite frankly, something really terrible happened and they fell and broke a hip, and then the next thing you know, they don't have the option to go into retirement. They're going right to long-term care. So that, I think, is something worth considering, particularly if it's going to be like banging your head against the wall. I would bring in the reinforcements.
All right, one more. The independent living you described sounds great, but most are very expensive. What options are there when your parents don't have $4,000 per month that most cost?
Oh, that's a tough one, because you're right. It's independent retirement is all private pay. I've certainly seen situations where looking at from what's government subsidized, which is long-term care, and then there's the whole criteria as far as being able to get assessed. And then certainly in Ontario, there's almost 40,000 people on the wait list. Again, without knowing a lot of the details, this would be another example to be able to talk to people out there who are very familiar with how to navigate the system. Sometimes there's adult daycare, which my husband, when he was ill, we did home care and adult daycare before he needed to move into long-term care, as well as some home care solutions. But I think it's, again, I really wish I had a quick cut dried answer for you. It really is about getting the right resources to get best informed, to look at what all of your options are, and then building a plan on that.
Yeah. And that was from Renee. And Renee, we also have some information that we can help you with. We have what's called a cost calculator that helps a lot of families. We can also email that to you as well, which would help. So I think I have one more. Do you have any tips on observing senior neighbors who are struggling in their homes, and how you might gently introduce new living arrangements without seeming too nosy or overstepping?
Oh, so it's a neighbor, it's not a parent, it's somebody that lives next door or in your neighborhood that you have concerns about.
Correct.
I think a lot of it has to do with what does the current relationship look like? It's almost, if there's already been some contacts and that it isn't unusual, then maybe you just increase the level of frequency. And it could also, another approach could be just to say, I'm going to make some assumptions in this story that they don't have kids or they're on their own, and that's why you have a level of concern, is to be able to call it as it is. I really care about you, and you're a great neighbor. And I find myself, quite frankly, sometimes worrying about you a little bit because I know that you're on your own. Would it be okay if I check in with you on whatever that time cadence is that you're thinking? You're going to know, I would think, based on your relationship with them, what you can say. And sometimes, gosh, I think we're all like this. We don't want to ask for help. But if somebody were to offer help to us, maybe the initial will be, no, that's okay, I can take care of myself. But you're also signaling that you care about this person and you want to be there to support them. And sometimes it's as easy as, how can I help? So I hope that was helpful.
Thank you. And that's the last question that we have.